First Contact's Whisper. The Quantum Observatory at Europa Station picked up the first signs of the Kordax fleet on a quiet Tuesday morning. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at her console, her dark eyes fixed on the wavering patterns that indicated hundreds of ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edges of the solar system. She didn't sound an alarm. She didn't need to. Through the neural mesh that connected all of humanity, her awareness rippled outward like rings in still water. Billions of minds acknowledged the information simultaneously, processing it with the collective calm that had become humanity's hallmark over the past century. The year was 2246, and Earth had maintained its self-imposed silence for nearly 50 years. Since developing the neural mesh, technology that allowed humans to share thoughts, emotions, and experiences directly, traditional forms of communication had become obsolete. The rest of the galaxy, with its radio waves and quantum transmissions, viewed Earth as an enigma, a civilization that had achieved faster-than-light travel, yet chose not to join the grand dance of galactic politics. Through the mesh, Sarah felt the collective consciousness shift as humanity prepared for what they had long anticipated: first contact on their terms. The approaching fleet belonged to the Kordax Federation, a militant civilization known for absorbing other species into their hierarchy through force or intimidation. They had likely interpreted Earth's silence as weakness, a fatal miscalculation that so many others had made throughout human history. Admiral James Okonjo stood on the observation deck of the orbital defense platform Aegis I, watching Earth's gleaming surface below. His dark skin reflected the blue glow of holographic displays, showing the Kordax fleet's approach. Through the mesh, he felt the steady resolve of his fellow defenders, the quiet confidence of a species that had transcended the need for traditional weapons of war. The Kordax ships were impressive by any standard, massive constructs of dark metal and pulsing energy fields, their designs clearly meant to intimidate. The lead vessel alone dwarfed humanity's largest space station. As they crossed the orbit of Mars, their intentions became clear. They had come to conquer. The first transmission arrived exactly as expected. Unidentified civilization. The message blared in multiple galactic standard languages. You have been chosen to receive the blessing of incorporation into the Kordax Federation. Surrender your autonomy and accept our guidance, or face immediate military response. No one on Earth bothered to respond with words. Instead, through the neural mesh, humanity reached a consensus in milliseconds. They would show rather than tell. The Kordax fleet entered weapons range, their energy signatures indicating charged weapon systems. They encountered no resistance, no defensive screens, no fighter squadrons scrambling to meet them. Earth's orbital platforms remained powered down, their defense systems dormant. Supreme Commander Vexthor of the Kordax stood on his command bridge, his scaled skin reflecting the ambient light of tactical displays. His species prided themselves on reading the intentions of their prey, but the humans puzzled him. Their technology was clearly advanced. He could detect the energy signatures of capabilities that rivaled or exceeded their own. Yet they made no move to defend themselves. Launch the first wave of dropships, he ordered, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into commands his crew could understand. Let us see how they respond to a show of force. The dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere, their hulls glowing with re-entry heat. They targeted major population centers: New Shanghai, Neo-Lagos, Greater London, and New Delhi Metropolitan. The Kordax expected panic, chaos, perhaps a last-minute attempt at resistance. Instead, they found millions of humans standing in vast gatherings, perfectly still, their eyes closed in what appeared to be meditation. In every city, in every nation, humanity waited in unified purpose. When the dropships landed and Kordax troops emerged in their battle armor, weapons raised, they found themselves facing unarmed crowds. A single human stepped forward from each gathering, chosen by the collective consciousness to serve as focal points. In New Shanghai, Dr. Chen herself stood before the aliens. In Neo-Lagos, it was Admiral Okonjo. Around the world, Selected representatives approached the invaders. Each carried a small device, unremarkable in appearance, yet containing humanity's response to aggression. The Kordak soldiers received no surrender, no pleas for mercy, no signs of fear. Instead, the human representatives simply activated their devices, and the true power of the neural mesh expanded outward. The effect was instantaneous. The Kordak's troops staggered as their minds were flooded with the collective experience of humanity. Not as a weapon, but as an invitation. They felt the joy of a child's first steps, the grief of losing a loved one, the triumph of scientific discovery, the wonder of artistic creation. They experienced the full spectrum of human emotion and thought, centuries of history and achievement compressed into moments of pure understanding. Through the mesh, humanity shared not just their memories and emotions, but their fundamental nature, their capacity for both creation and destruction, their ability to unite without losing individuality, their willingness to face the unknown with curiosity rather than fear. Supreme Commander Vexthor, watching through his troops' neural feeds, felt his understanding of power shift fundamentally. The humans hadn't been hiding in silence. They had evolved beyond the need for primitive displays of strength. Their unity wasn't enforced through hierarchy and fear like the Kordaks, but through a deep voluntary connection that preserved and celebrated individual consciousness while creating something far greater than the sum of its parts. As the first day of contact drew to a close, the Kordaks found themselves retreating, not in defeat, but in profound contemplation. They had come expecting to find a weak civilization hiding from the galaxy. Instead, they had encountered something that would forever change their understanding of strength, unity, and the true meaning of communication. Through the neural mesh, humanity shared a collective moment of satisfaction. They had faced their first major extraterrestrial challenge, not with weapons or words, but with the truth of who they had become. As the sun set over Earth's cities, the silence remained unbroken, but the message had never been clearer. Humanity had evolved beyond the need for violence, beyond the limitations of verbal communication, into something the galaxy had never seen before. And this was only the beginning. The silent defense. In the wake of the Kordak's retreat, Earth's orbital stations hummed with activity. Not the frantic preparations for war that most species would expect, but a deeper resonance of minds working in concert through the neural mesh. Dr. Maya Patel, chief architect of the mesh's latest evolution, monitored the collective consciousness from her laboratory beneath the Himalayan peaks. Through the mesh, she felt the ripples of the Kordak's minds that had touched humanity's shared consciousness. They had left traces, echoes of their own experiences and cultures that humanity now studied with intense curiosity. The invasion force had unknowingly given Earth its first real insight into galactic civilization, and the neural mesh was processing this information with unprecedented efficiency. They'll return, Maya shared through the mesh, her thought patterns tinged with analytical certainty. The collective consciousness acknowledged this truth, billions of minds considering the implications simultaneously. The Kordak's retreat wasn't an end, but a prelude to something far more significant. In high orbit, Admiral Okonjo's consciousness merged with the defense grid's quantum processors. Earth's dormant defensive systems weren't powered down out of weakness, but choice. The platforms housed something far more sophisticated than conventional weapons. They were nodes in humanity's greatest achievement since the neural mesh itself, the empathy amplification network. The network had been humanity's response to an age-old question: how to defend themselves without perpetuating the cycle of violence. Traditional weapons remained as a last resort, but the real power lay in their ability to share consciousness not just among themselves, but with any sentient species they encountered. Through the mesh, humanity reviewed the first contact experience, analyzing every nuance of the Kordak's reaction. Their militant society was built on strict hierarchies and the suppression of individual consciousness in favor of collective obedience. The neural mesh had shattered their understanding of unity by showing them a fundamentally different way of existing. 3 days after the retreat, the Kordaks returned. This time, Their fleet was twice the size. Supreme Commander Vexthor had spent those 3 days in intense deliberation with the Kordax High Command. The initial contact had shaken their civilization's most basic assumptions about power and consciousness. Half the High Command wanted to retreat permanently, viewing humanity as too dangerous to confront. The other half insisted on a show of overwhelming force to crush this threat to their way of life. The compromise was an ultimatum. Humanity would either join the Kordax Federation on special terms or face complete isolation through a blockade of their solar system. What the Kordax didn't understand was that humanity had already chosen isolation, not out of fear or weakness, but as a necessary step in their evolution. As the Kordax fleet took up attack positions around Earth's orbital planes, humanity responded with an unprecedented expansion of consciousness. Dr. Chen, working from Europa Station, initiated the final phase of Project Harmony, the ability to extend the neural mesh beyond Earth's immediate sphere of influence. The effect rippled outward like a wave of pure thought. Every Kordax ship, from the smallest scout to Vexthor's massive flagship, found their crews suddenly immersed in humanity's collective consciousness. But this time, it wasn't just a demonstration. It was an invitation to genuine dialogue. Through the mesh, humanity shared their journey. The wars, the suffering, and the ultimate realization that true strength lay not in domination but in understanding. They showed the Kordax how the neural mesh had developed not as a tool of control, but as a means of preserving and celebrating individual consciousness while achieving perfect unity. Vexthor, standing on his command bridge, felt his mind expand beyond anything he had ever experienced. The rigid hierarchies of Kordax society had always taught that individual consciousness was a weakness, that true power came from submitting to the will of the collective. But here was something different, a unity that enhanced rather than suppressed individuality. The empathy amplification network didn't just share human thoughts and emotions. It created a space for genuine exchange. As the Kordax experienced human consciousness, humans gained insight into the deep-seated fears and aspirations that drove Kordax society. They saw generations of conditioning, the belief that only through strict control could chaos be prevented. In orbit around Mars, a curious phenomenon began to occur. Some Kordax crews, particularly the younger members, began to resist their conditioning. The neural mesh had shown them an alternative to their society's rigid structure, and the idea spread like wildfire through their ranks. Maya felt the change through the mesh, not just in the Kordax, but in humanity as well. Their consciousness was evolving, adapting to incorporate new perspectives and ways of thinking. The defense of Earth had become something far more profound than a simple military victory. Admiral Okonjo, monitoring the situation through the defense grid, recognized the historical significance of the moment. Humanity had developed the neural mesh as a means of transcending their own limitations, but now it was becoming a bridge between civilizations. As the second day of the renewed contact drew to a close, the Kordax fleet remained in position, but their purpose had fundamentally changed. What had begun as an invasion was transforming into the first true dialogue between two radically different forms of consciousness. Through the mesh, humanity maintained their silence, letting the pure exchange of thoughts and emotions speak volumes that words never could. They had defended Earth not with weapons, but with understanding. The silent defense had proven more powerful than any fleet or army. The galaxy was about to change, and the quiet revolution had only just begun. Echoes of understanding. News of the Kordax fleet's transformation spread through the galaxy like ripples in a cosmic pond. The greatest military force in known space hadn't been defeated. They had been fundamentally changed. In the Galactic Council's chambers, representatives from 1,000 worlds debated the implications with growing urgency. The Kordax ships remained in Earth's orbit, but their purpose had shifted from blockade to protection. Supreme Commander Vexthor, through the neural mesh, had experienced something that his species had never thought possible: true collective consciousness that enhanced rather than suppressed individuality. Dr. Maya Patel, and her team worked tirelessly to understand the unexpected developments in the mesh's capabilities. The interaction with the Kordax had caused the system to evolve in ways they hadn't predicted. Through their shared consciousness, humanity was learning as much from the Kordax as the Kordax were learning from them. Their hierarchical structure, Maya shared through the mesh, her thoughts tinged with fascination. It's not just social, it's deeply embedded in their biology. Their species evolved from collective insects, like Earth's ants or bees. What we're seeing is the awakening of dormant neural pathways. The Kordax crews who had first experienced the mesh were changing. Their rigid exoskeletons, once uniform in their metallic sheen, began displaying patterns of iridescent colors, physical manifestations of their awakening individuality. It was as if the species was experiencing its own renaissance, catalyzed by contact with human consciousness. Admiral Okonjo, coordinating with the defense grid, detected the approach of new vessels. Not Kordax this time, but ships from dozens of different species. The Galactic Council had decided to investigate directly. What they found was beyond their expectations. The neural mesh had created something unprecedented, a bridge not just between human and Kordax minds, but a potential connection to all sentient consciousness. Dr. Chen, monitoring from Europa Station, detected the first tentative attempts at contact from the alien observers. Through the mesh, humanity felt the distinctive patterns of different species' thoughts. The crystalline consciousness of the Silicon Collective, the quantum-entangled awareness of the Void Dancers, the biochemical networks of the Myceli, each unique, each offering new perspectives on the nature of existence itself. But it was the response of the archivists that truly changed everything. This ancient species, known for their neutrality and their role as galactic record-keepers, recognized something in human consciousness that they had seen only once before. Through careful diplomatic channels, the first words humanity had exchanged with any species, the archivists shared their discovery. Eons ago, they had encountered evidence of the precursors, a species that had allegedly seeded consciousness throughout the galaxy. The neural patterns in human consciousness matched their records of precursor technology. The revelation rippled through the mesh, billions of human minds processing its implications. Humanity hadn't just developed a new form of communication. They had independently recreated the work of the galaxy's first advanced civilization. Vexthor, who had remained in constant contact through the mesh, was the first to understand the fuller implications. "Your silence," he communicated, his thoughts carrying the weight of revelation. It wasn't just about evolution. You were listening for echoes of the precursors. The truth was both simpler and more complex. Humanity's development of the neural mesh had been organic, driven by their own need to transcend the limitations of verbal and written communication. But in doing so, they had tapped into something fundamental to the nature of consciousness itself. The Galactic Council representatives, after experiencing the mesh directly, came to a profound realization. The galaxy's various species had evolved different forms of consciousness, but all contained the potential for deeper connection. Humanity hadn't just developed a new technology. They had rediscovered a fundamental truth about the nature of sentient life. Dr. Patel's team began documenting unprecedented changes in the mesh itself. The interaction with multiple species' consciousness was causing it to evolve, becoming something greater than its creators had envisioned. It was adapting, learning, growing into a true universal translator of thought and experience. Through the defense grid's quantum processors, Admiral Okonjo detected subtle changes in the fabric of space-time around Earth. The combined consciousness of multiple species, connected through the mesh, was having effects that defied conventional physics. Reality itself seemed to be responding to the unprecedented convergence of minds. The Kordax, once proud conquerors, found themselves in the role of students and teachers simultaneously. Their ancient biological programming, rather than being erased, was being transformed. The hierarchy remained, but it had become organic rather than imposed, a fluid structure that served the species' needs while allowing for individual growth. As the third phase of contact drew to a close, Humanity maintained their verbal silence, but through the mesh, they were more communicative than ever before. The galaxy was beginning to understand that Earth's silence hadn't been a rejection of communication, but rather an evolution beyond its most primitive forms. The echoes of understanding reached further with each passing moment, and the true transformation was only beginning. The ripple effect. The discovery that humans had independently recreated precursor technology sent shockwaves through galactic civilization. Within weeks, the space around Earth had become a gathering point for species seeking to understand and experience the neural mesh. But humanity, even in this moment of revelation, maintained their measured approach. Dr. Sarah Chen, working with the archivist delegation on Europa Station, began to understand the true scope of what humanity had stumbled upon. Through the mesh, she accessed the ancient records they had brought, experiencing firsthand the fragments of precursor consciousness preserved within. They weren't trying to create an empire. She shared through the collective consciousness, her revelation spreading instantly to billions of connected minds. The precursors were attempting to create a unified field of consciousness, a way for all sentient life to connect and grow together. The neural mesh was evolving rapidly now, adapting to accommodate the thought patterns of dozens of different species. Each new consciousness that joined added another layer of complexity and understanding. The void dancers contributed their mastery of quantum entanglement, allowing the mesh to extend its reach across vast distances. The Silicon Collective offered their expertise in crystalline data storage, enabling the preservation of shared experiences with perfect clarity. Admiral Okonjo, through his connection to Earth's defense grid, detected something unprecedented. The combined consciousness of multiple species was having a measurable effect on the fabric of reality itself. Quantum fluctuations around Earth had begun to form patterns that defied conventional physics. The mesh isn't just a communication network, Dr. Maya Patel realized, her thoughts resonating through the collective. It's becoming a tool for manipulating reality at the quantum level. The precursors didn't just want to connect consciousness, they were trying to evolve it to the next stage of existence. The Kordax, still maintaining their protective formation around Earth, had become living proof of the mesh's transformative power. Their society, once rigidly hierarchical, had evolved into something new. The individual colors that had begun appearing on their exoskeletons had developed into complex patterns that reflected their thoughts and emotions, a visual language that complemented their connection to the mesh. Supreme Commander Vexthor, his own exoskeleton, now a shifting canvas of iridescent hues, had become a bridge between the old and new ways of thinking. Through him, other militant species began to understand that true strength lay not in dominance, but in connection and growth. The Galactic Council, faced with undeniable evidence of consciousness evolution, underwent its own transformation. Ancient power structures based on military might and economic control began to crumble as more species experienced the mesh. The ability to truly understand another's perspective made traditional forms of conflict seem primitive and unnecessary. But not all reactions were positive. Some species, particularly those whose power relied on isolation and control, began to view Earth with growing alarm. The hegemony of rigid thought, a collective of silicon-based life forms who had rejected all forms of external influence, declared the mesh a threat to galactic stability. Through the defense grid's quantum sensors, humanity detected their movements. A fleet of crystalline ships, designed to be impervious to traditional forms of communication and influence, was gathering at the edge of known space. Their intent was clear: to stop the spread of the mesh before it could further disrupt the established order. Yet humanity remained calm. Through their century of silence, they had learned patience and understanding. The mesh had shown them that every consciousness, no matter how alien or opposed, contained the potential for growth and connection. Dr. Chen, working with the archivists, made another breakthrough in understanding the precursor records. They faced opposition too. She shared through the mesh. But they knew that consciousness, once expanded, cannot be constrained. The desire for connection is fundamental to all sentient life. The silicon ships drew closer, their crystalline structures designed to reflect and deflect any attempt at mental contact. They hadn't accounted for how the mesh had evolved. The combined consciousness of multiple species had created something that transcended traditional barriers between mind and matter. As the Hegemony fleet entered the solar system, they encountered not resistance, but an invitation. The mesh, now capable of interfacing with any form of consciousness, reached out to them with an offer of understanding. Through the quantum fluctuations that Admiral Okonjo had detected, even their crystalline minds could experience the truth of connected consciousness. The effect was profound. The rigid crystalline structures of the Hegemony ships began to resonate with new frequencies, their very matter responding to the expanded consciousness they were experiencing. What had been designed as a weapon of isolation became a conduit for connection. Dr. Patel, monitoring the changes through the mesh's expanded capabilities, recognized the significance of what was happening. "We're not just changing minds," she shared. "We're changing the very nature of reality itself." The precursors knew that consciousness and matter are two expressions of the same fundamental force. The ripple effect had become a wave, transforming not just individual minds or societies, but the very fabric of galactic civilization. Earth's silence had led them to this moment, not as conquerors or saviors, but as catalysts for an evolution that had been waiting to happen since the precursors first seeded consciousness throughout the galaxy. And still, humanity maintained their verbal silence, letting the truth of connected consciousness speak louder than any words could. A new symphony. In the quantum laboratories beneath the Himalayan peaks, Dr. Maya Patel stood before a holographic display that showed not data, but consciousness itself. The neural mesh had evolved beyond its creator's wildest dreams, becoming a symphony of thought and experience that spanned the galaxy. The patterns of connected minds created structures of impossible beauty, a visual representation of unity and diversity. 1 year had passed since humanity's silence had changed everything. The Hegemony's transformed fleet now orbited Saturn, their crystalline structures serving as amplifiers for the mesh's expanding capabilities. The Kordax had evolved into teachers, helping other hierarchical species navigate the transformation of consciousness. Earth had become not a center of power, but a nexus of understanding. Through the mesh, Admiral Okonjo shared a discovery that would once again reshape their understanding. The quantum fluctuations they had detected weren't just affecting consciousness, they were creating stable wormholes throughout the galaxy. The precursor's true legacy wasn't just the connection of minds, but the transcendence of space-time itself. They understood that consciousness and reality are inseparable. Dr. Chen transmitted from Europa Station, her thoughts carrying the weight of revelation. The mesh isn't just a network. It's the beginning of our species' ascension to a higher state of existence. The archivists, who had maintained their vigil over galactic knowledge for eons, confirmed what humanity had begun to suspect. The precursors hadn't vanished. They had evolved beyond the physical realm. The neural mesh was recreating their path, not by design but through the natural evolution of connected consciousness. Supreme Commander Vexthor, his exoskeleton now a living canvas of thought and emotion, had become a symbol of transformation throughout the galaxy. "We sought to conquer worlds," he shared through the mesh, "when we should have been seeking to transcend them." The Galactic Council, transformed by a year of shared consciousness, convened one final time in physical form. Representatives from every known species gathered not to debate or legislate, but to acknowledge the fundamental change that was sweeping through civilization. The old structures of power and control were dissolving, replaced by a new understanding of existence itself. Through the defense grid's quantum processors, humanity detected the first signs of what they had unconsciously been preparing for. The combined consciousness of countless species, amplified by the mesh, was beginning to affect the fundamental constants of the universe. Reality itself was responding to the symphony of connected minds. Dr. Patel's team, working with scientists from across the galaxy, confirmed what the precursor records had hinted at. Consciousness wasn't just an emergent property of complex systems. It was a fundamental force of the universe, as essential as gravity or electromagnetism. The mesh had simply awakened what had always been present. The Silicon Collective, once bound by rigid crystalline thought patterns, had discovered that their very structure could resonate with the mesh's frequencies. The Void Dancers found that their mastery of quantum entanglement was merely the first step toward true connection. The Myceli's biochemical networks expanded beyond their fungal origins to embrace all forms of life. But it was humanity's role that proved most surprising. Their century of silence hadn't been a retreat from the galaxy, but a necessary preparation. By turning inward, by mastering the connection between individual and collective consciousness, they had unknowingly prepared themselves to guide others through the same transformation. As the mesh continued to evolve, traditional barriers between species began to fade. Physical forms remained distinct, but consciousness flowed freely between them, creating a tapestry of experience and understanding that encompassed all of existence. The galaxy had become a single symphony of thought, each species contributing its unique note to the greater harmony. The hegemonies transformed ships, their crystalline structures now pulsing with shared consciousness, detected the first messages from beyond the galaxy's edge. Other civilizations, drawn by the resonance of connected minds, were reaching out across the vast distances of space. The mesh was expanding beyond anything its creators had imagined, becoming a beacon for all sentient life. Through it all, humanity maintained their verbal silence, but their consciousness, joined with countless others in the universal symphony, spoke volumes about the true nature of existence. They had discovered that the most profound truths couldn't be contained in words. They had to be experienced, shared, and understood on a level that transcended traditional communication. The day Earth chose silence had become the day the galaxy found its voice. Not in words or signals or transmissions, but in the pure connection of consciousness to consciousness. The precursor's dream had been realized, not through conquest or control, but through humanity's simple choice to listen rather than speak. And in that silence, a new form of existence had been born. The galaxy's symphony played on, growing richer and more complex with each mind that joined the chorus. The silence that had once seemed like isolation had become the key to ultimate connection, and the journey of consciousness had only just begun. Humanity's greatest message had been its silence, and that silence had changed everything forever.